Tired of seedlings taking over every windowsill? It's the same old spring story, isn't it? Windows blocked with cups, sunlight gone, and the cats are always plotting to knock over your future peppers and tomatoes. But what if I told you that you could directly sow some veggies straight into the garden, skipping all the seedling hassle? Yep, today we're diving into 8 awesome vegetables that thrive without needing any coddling on the windowsill. And you'll be surprised how easy it can be. The tradition of starting everything from seed indoors is really ingrained in our thinking, especially if you live in areas with short summers. But historically, many crops were sown directly into the ground. And it's not just about the climate, it's also about the specific nature of the plants themselves. Some just really don't like being disturbed by transplanting. They're happier if they sprout and grow in the same spot until harvest. It's not only easier for you, but often healthier for the plant. Okay, so which vegetables are best sown directly into the ground? And who's first on our list of no transplant heroes? Drum roll, please. It's radish. Yes, good old red, crunchy radish. This guy is a true speed demon in the vegetable world. Just imagine, you sow the seeds, and only 3 to 4 weeks later, you're crunching on fresh radishes. If that's not a small miracle for those of us with limited patience. The main reason radish prefers direct sowing is that it really hates being disturbed. It has a delicate taproot that needs to form undisturbed in its final home. Trying to transplant small radish seedlings often leads to crooked, stunted roots, or the plant just doesn't develop properly. So for radish, the best start is a direct shot into the soil. What do you need to grow radish this way? First, loose fertile soil. No big clumps allowed. Radish appreciates light soil. Second, the correct sowing depth. The seeds are quite small, so plant them shallowly, about 1/2 inch deep. Too deep and they may not germinate. Too shallow and they could dry out. Third, regular watering. Radish loves moisture. If it doesn't get enough water, it becomes bitter and woody. And it's also important not to overcrowd the seedlings. Sow the seeds about 1 inch apart, and after they sprout, you can thin them out a bit, leaving the strongest plants. You can sow radish very early in the spring, as soon as the ground thaws. It's cold hardy. And to harvest fresh radishes all summer long, you can do successive sowings every 2 to 3 weeks. It creates a freshness conveyor belt. Radish is one of the easiest vegetables to start with. It gives quick results and inspires further gardening adventures. Sow, water, harvest. It doesn't get much simpler than that. So, that's our speedy friend, the radish. But that's just the beginning. What about another popular root vegetable that also absolutely hates being transplanted? Okay, but what about another popular root vegetable that absolutely hates being transplanted? You guessed it. Next up, it's carrots. Our orange, or sometimes purple, favourites. Now carrots are another vegetable that screams, "Leave my roots alone." Like radishes, carrots develop a central taproot, that delicious part we grow them for. This root grows straight down and is super sensitive to any damage or stress early on. When you try to start carrots indoors as seedlings and then transplant them, you almost always damage that taproot. And what happens then? The plant starts growing side roots trying to compensate. The result? You get something branched and wonky, sometimes with multiple legs, instead of a nice straight carrot. Sure, they're still edible, but they're much harder to peel, and they don't look nearly as appealing. That's why professional growers and experienced gardeners always sow carrot seeds directly into the ground. When to sow? Usually fairly early in spring, as soon as the soil is workable. Carrots are cold hardy and can handle light frosts after they sprout. The key to successfully growing carrots from seed is perfectly prepared soil. It needs to be loose, deeply tilled, and free of rocks and large clumps. Carrots need space for their taproot to grow freely downwards without any obstacles. Carrot seeds are tiny. You should sow them shallowly, about 1/2 inch deep. You can sow them individually or mix them with sand for more even distribution. And here's another important tip. Watering after sowing. Tiny seeds dry out easily on the surface. So, gently water the area after sowing, preferably with a watering can with a fine rose to avoid washing away the seeds, and keep the soil moist until they sprout. Once the carrots have sprouted and grown a bit, you absolutely have to thin them out. This is probably the most tedious part of growing carrots, but it's crucial. Leave about 2 inches between plants to get larger carrots. Skipping thinning means you'll get lots of skinny, small carrots instead of a few large juicy ones. So, if you want straight, beautiful carrots, forget about seedlings. Direct sowing into a well-prepared bed is the way to go. It's no harder than with radishes, it just requires a bit more attention to the soil and thinning, and the result will make you proud. And who's next? Another plant that doesn't like moving? Meet the beetroot, our rich burgundy, healthy, and very unfussy beetroot. Beetroot is another root vegetable that, like carrots and radishes, really dislikes being transplanted. It also forms a central taproot that develops into that round or cylindrical root we eat. Damaging this root when transplanting seedlings can lead to deformed beetroots, making them crooked or growing into an irregular shape. And we want beautiful, uniform beetroots, right? Plus, beetroot seeds have an interesting peculiarity. What we buy as a seed is actually a seed ball or cluster. Inside, there are typically 2 to 6 true seeds. When you sow one of these seed balls, it often sprouts several seedlings at once. If you sow them in seedling cups, you'll still have to either snip off the extra seedlings or separate them, both of which damage the roots. With direct sowing into the ground after they sprout, you simply carefully thin these bouquets, leaving the single strongest plant from each seed ball. When should you sow beetroot? It's more warmth-loving than radishes and carrots, so sow beetroot after the risk of late frost has passed and the soil has warmed up. This is usually late May to early June in temperate regions. The soil for beetroot should be fertile and loose. Beetroot doesn't like fresh manure, so it's best to add fertilizer in advance. Sow seeds about 2 to 3 centimeters deep. The seeds are quite large, making them easy to sow. After sowing, keep the soil consistently moist until the seedlings emerge. The most important step after sprouting is thinning. This is done in 2 stages. The first time, when the plants have a pair of true leaves, thin to about 3 or 4 centimeters apart. The second time, when the plants are bigger, increase the spacing to 8 to 10 centimeters apart, depending on the variety. By the way, you can use the young beetroot thinnings in salads, either as microgreens or young leaves. It's delicious and reduces waste. After thinning, beetroot care is minimal, just watering as needed, especially during dry spells, and weeding. And growing a great crop of beetroot by direct sowing is really quite simple. It just grows happily in the garden bed, without needing any attention on a windowsill. This is very convenient, especially if you're planting a lot of beetroot. Now let's move on to the easiest ones on this list, which you can literally sow in bunches. Okay, let's move on to the easiest things to grow from seed, the ones you can practically broadcast and harvest all summer long. I'm talking about greens, of course. All sorts of leafy greens, spinach, lettuce, all kinds, loose leaf, romaine, butterhead, arugula, rocket, and cress. These are lifesavers when you want fresh greens ASAP with minimal effort. Greens are perfect for direct sowing for a few reasons. First, they're super fast growing. You're looking at just 2 to 3 weeks from sowing to your first harvest for most lettuces and arugula. Spinach takes a little longer. Second, greens usually have shallow root systems. They don't need to dig deep like carrots or beets, so germinating right in the top layer of soil is perfect for them. Third, you can sow greens really early in the spring, as soon as the ground thaws. Many varieties are cold hardy and can handle light frosts. And the best part, to keep the fresh greens coming, sow in succession. Plant your first row, then another a couple of weeks later, then another, and so on, until the end of summer. While the first row is producing, the second is growing, and the third is just sprouting. When the first row is done or starts to bolt, send up a flower stalk, pull it out, and you can sow it again. For direct sowing greens, you don't need any special soil. Just make sure it's loose and doesn't dry out too fast. Green seeds are tiny, so sow them shallowly, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep, 0.5, 1 cm. You can sow in rows or just scatter them across the bed and gently rake them in. After sowing, water the bed and keep it moist. This is especially important for small seeds, which dry out easily on the surface. Once the seedlings emerge, if they're too crowded, you can thin them a bit, but it's not as crucial for leafy greens as it is for root vegetables. You can just snip the extra plants and use them as microgreens. Caring for greens mainly comes down to regular watering. In hot weather, water frequently to keep the leaves juicy and crisp and prevent the plants from bolting prematurely. Direct sowing greens is so easy that even a kid can do it, and having fresh salad or arugula from your own garden is a real treat. Forget store-bought greens that wilt quickly. Homegrown is always the tastiest. So if you love fresh salads, go ahead and sow greens straight into the garden, and don't just do it once a season. Now let's move on to legumes, which also do great when direct sown. Alright, let's talk about legumes, starting with peas. Yeah, those sweet, juicy green peas that everyone loves. Peas are a dream come true if you hate dealing with seedlings. Why? Because their seeds are nice and big, easy to handle, easy to sow, and they sprout quickly. Direct sowing peas is the way to go. It's how they've always been planted, straight into the field or garden. Peas don't like being transplanted. Like a lot of plants, they get stressed when their roots are disturbed. With direct sowing, the seed sprouts, the root goes straight down, and the plant grows continuously without any downtime to adjust after being moved. So when should you plant peas? Peas are pretty hardy. You can plant them really early in the spring, as soon as the ground thaws and dries out a bit. The earlier you plant peas, the better. They thrive in moderate temperatures. When it gets really hot, their productivity drops. The soil for peas needs to be loose and well drained. They don't like soggy conditions. Plant the pea seeds about 1 inch or 2 deep, 3 to 5 centimetres. You can plant them in rows, spacing the seeds a couple of inches, 5 and 7 centimetres, apart. Or you can plant them in clusters, with 3 to 5 seeds per hole, spacing the holes about 8 to 12 inches, 20-30 centimetres, apart. After planting, give the soil a good watering. Peas love moisture, especially when they're flowering and forming pods. Once the peas sprout and grow a bit, they'll need some support. Peas are vines, so they need something to climb on. Put up some stakes, netting, or run some twine along the rows. This will not only help the plants grow upright, but also make it easier to harvest the peas and keep the plants well ventilated. After planting, caring for peas is pretty minimal. Water during dry spells, weed, and if needed, protect them from pests, like pea weevils. Start harvesting when the pods are plump, but the peas inside are still tender. We're talking about that milky stage. Pick the pods regularly to encourage the plant to keep producing more. Growing your own peas is super easy and delicious. No messing with seedlings, just plant them straight in the garden. Now, let's move on to its close relative, which also thrives when planted directly. Okay, let's talk about beans, a close relative that also thrives when directly sown but needs a bit more warmth. Bush beans, in particular, are a great option. Like peas, beans have fairly large seeds, making them easy to handle when planting. And just like peas, beans aren't big fans of being transplanted. Direct sowing lets their roots develop naturally from the start, avoiding transplant shock. Now the key is when to plant beans. They're heat-loving and definitely don't tolerate frost. Wait until the weather is consistently warm and the soil has heated up before planting. This usually means after the last spring frost, often late May or early June, in many areas. Planting too early in cold soil can cause the seeds to rot before they even sprout. Beans prefer loose, well-drained and fertile soil. They actually enrich the soil with nitrogen thanks to the beneficial bacteria on their roots, so they're a great addition to any garden. Plant bean seeds about 1.5 to 2 inches deep, a little deeper than peas. Sow them in rows, spacing the seeds about 3 to 4 inches apart for bush varieties, and leave about 16 to 20 inches between rows. Water the soil well after planting. Bean sprouts usually emerge pretty quickly, within a week or two. Bean care is simple. Water, weed, and maybe hill them lightly. Bush beans don't need any support. They grow in a compact bush, which is perfect for smaller gardens. Harvest time depends on the type of bean. If you're growing snap beans for the pods, pick them as the pods mature, while they're still tender and juicy. If it's dry beans you are after, let the pods fully mature and dry out on the plant. Growing beans from seed is a fantastic way to get a delicious and healthy harvest without the hassle of starting with transplants. Just wait for the soil to warm up and get planting. So, we've covered beans. Now, let's move on to a super popular summer vegetable that many people grow from transplants, but it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, so we've covered beans. Now, let's talk about one of the most popular summer vegetables, cucumbers. A lot of people start them indoors, but you don't always have to. Yep, you can totally grow cucumbers by directly sowing the seeds right in the garden. Sure, starting them as seedlings gives you a head start, but planting seeds directly has its own advantages. The biggest one? You get stronger, healthier, and more resilient plants. Like many other veggies, cucumbers don't love being transplanted. Their roots are super delicate. When you transplant cucumber seedlings, they get stressed and they need time to recover. This can delay them from producing or make them more susceptible to diseases. Plants grown directly from seed don't go through that stress. Their roots develop naturally in the garden soil from the get-go. This often makes them more tolerant of temperature changes and less prone to root rot. So, when's the right time to sow cucumber seeds directly? Cucumbers are heat lovers. They can't handle even a tiny bit of frost. Wait until all danger of frost is gone and the soil has warmed up to at least 60 and 65 degree Celsius, around 15-18 degrees size, at a depth of about 4 and 5 inches, 10 to 12 centimetres. This usually happens in late May or early June, depending on where you live. Don't rush it. It's better to sow a little later into warm soil than too early into cold soil. The soil for cucumbers should be really fertile, loose, and full of organic matter. Cucumbers are heavy feeders. You can add compost or well-rotted manure to the planting holes. Plant the seeds about an inch deep, 2 to 3 centimetres. Sow them in rows or in hills, small mounds, spacing the plants about 8 to 12 inches apart, 20-30 centimetres, for vining types, or 12 to 16 inches apart, 30 to 40 centimetres, for bush varieties. You can put 2 to 3 seeds in each hole and then thin them later, leaving the strongest plant. After sowing, water the area well. Cucumbers need plenty of moisture, especially when they're growing and producing fruit. Once the seedlings emerge, care involves watering regularly with warm water, weeding, gently loosening the soil around the plants, and, if needed, providing support for the vines to climb. Many experienced gardeners prefer direct sowing cucumbers, believing the plants are more vigorous and produce a great harvest. Sure, the harvest might be a little later than with transplants, but the plants will be strong and robust. So, if you're not in a huge rush for the first cucumber, definitely give direct sowing a try. Now let's move on to fragrant herbs, a must-have for any garden. Okay, let's talk about those fragrant herbs that are a staple in every garden and summer salad. Dill and parsley. They're absolutely essential in the kitchen. And here's the thing, they're champions of easy growing, because you absolutely don't need to start them indoors. Dill and parsley thrive when directly sown into the garden. You just plant the seeds right in the ground, and they'll grow until fall, often even longer. Why direct sow? First, it's incredibly convenient. The seeds are small and easy to scatter where you want them. Second, you can plant these herbs super early in the spring, as soon as the ground thaws. They're pretty cold hardy. Dill tends to sprout quickly as soon as it finds moisture. Parsley, however, can be a little slow to germinate. Its seeds have oils that delay sprouting. But that doesn't mean you need to start it indoors. Just be patient or try a few tricks to speed things up, like soaking the seeds before planting. Dill and parsley don't need any special soil. The most important thing is that the soil is loose and well drained. Plant the seeds shallowly, only about 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep. Dill often self-seeds, spreading on its own if you let it flower and scatter its seeds. You can sow parsley in rows or simply scatter the seeds across the bed. To keep a steady supply of fresh dill and parsley all summer long, sow seeds every 2 to 3 weeks, just like with leafy greens. This will ensure a constant flow of fresh sprigs. Caring for dill and parsley is simple. Just water during dry spells and weed as needed. Dill can grow very densely if you don't thin it. This isn't a big deal, but the plants will be a bit smaller. Parsley grows fairly slowly after sprouting, but once it gets going, it will produce greens until the first frost. There's leafy parsley, which you can harvest as needed, and root parsley, which develops an edible root in addition to the greens. Root parsley is also directly sown, as it doesn't like transplanting due to the root formation. Dill and parsley are essential crops for any garden, and growing them from seed is so easy that even a beginner can do it without any problems. So if you want fragrant herbs close at hand, just grab a packet of seeds and head out to the garden. That wraps up our list of hero plants that don't need starting indoors. But there are other crops that you can try growing this way as well. Okay, here's that text, translated and adapted for a native English speaker and optimized for AI narration. But there's one key thing people often miss about direct seeding, and it's crucial. It's not just a sow and forget method. The real trick is the soil prep. You need loose, fine soil, especially for tiny seeds like carrots or radishes. No big clumps allowed. Also, getting the right planting depth and watering gently after sowing is essential. Too deep, and they won't sprout. Too shallow, and they'll dry out. Some people think direct seeding is only for greens or a lazy way to garden, but try direct sowing carrots or beets. You'll be amazed at how much stronger and healthier the plants are, and how uniform the harvest is. That's the magic that makes direct sowing so appealing. So, these are some of our favourite no-transplant champions. Try a few from this list this year. You'll appreciate all the time and space you save on your windowsills. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel for more great gardening tips, and let us know in the comments. What vegetables are you already direct sowing? Or which ones from this list are you excited to try?